She thought she married a poor man until she discovered his shocking mafia fortune. It was a chill night in suburban Chicago, and the moon hung low, casting eerie shadows on the quiet streets. Melanie had always believed she married the simplest of men. Nick was charming, dark hair, easy smile, steady job at the auto shop. But no one could have imagined the truth lurking just below the surface. What she didn't know sent shivers down her spine. She was a few clicks away from unveiling a life of glittering riches, hidden dangers, and a shocking family legacy that would turn her world upside down. One evening, as she was cleaning out their dusty attic, Melanie stumbled upon a vintage briefcase. It was surprisingly heavy, glinting under the dim light like a dark secret. Heart racing, she popped it open, and her jaw dropped. Inside were stacks, no, mountains of money. The kind of cash that could silence any small-town gossip. Alongside the cash sat a blood-red envelope marked with an intricate seal. It looked like something out of a movie, and for a moment, time stood still. Who would keep that much money hidden away? Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest as panic filled her thoughts. Questions swirled in her mind like a summer storm. Had Nick been lying about everything? Their love story, the late-night phone calls, the random tech upgrades on their devices. She could feel her hands trembling as she reached for the envelope. What if this was more than just cash? What if it represented something dangerous? Her throat tightened. She was both terrified and undeniably intrigued. Melanie thumbed through the bills, feeling the crisp texture against her skin. A muffled sound from the living room made her freeze. Nick had come home early. Panic gripped her tighter than ever. What would she say if he discovered her digging through his secrets? She caught her breath, realizing she'd have to play it cool, pretend like everything was just another ordinary evening. But how could she, knowing the man she loved might be hiding an entire criminal empire? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. With her heart racing and the briefcase still open, Melanie's thoughts raced faster than a NYC taxi. How deep did Nick's secrets run? Every clock tick sounded like a countdown. A sudden noise broke the tension, sending goosebumps prickling down her arms. Nick's footsteps echoed ominously as he moved through their small home. This wasn't just a marriage anymore, it was a tangled web of lies. All she could think was what would happen when the truth finally surfaced to the surface. Would she be strong enough to face it, or would she drown in a sea of secrets and betrayal? An unsettling feeling gnawed at her, and she knew this was just the beginning. Melanie's heart raced uncontrollably as she shoved the briefcase closed and scrambled to her feet. She could hear Nick's keys jangling as he entered, the sound slicing through the air like a butcher's knife. Her pulse fought to keep pace with the impending confrontation looming like a dark cloud overhead. "Hey, babe," Nick called out, his voice cheery, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. She quickly brushed dust off her jeans, hoping to convince him everything was normal. She plastered on a smile, but her gut twisted. How could she act normal when the weight of potential betrayal hung over her head like a guillotine? "Hey. I was just tidying up." Great, real original. If only he knew she wasn't just tidying, she was unearthing gold-coated secrets. Melanie hurriedly tucked the briefcase behind the stairs, praying he wouldn't notice the faint outline through the dim light. Stepping towards him, she forced her gaze into his eyes, desperate to see if they held any traces of the truth. But his smile was unwavering, a perfect mask of the man she thought she knew. "How was your day?" she asked, keeping her voice light. Nick shrugged, slipping off his jacket. "Same old. Fixed a Ford truck, got some customers talking about the game this weekend." He moved to the living room, plopping down on the couch with a relaxed sigh. It was so easy for him, so casual. It made her sick. Oh, did something happen with the customers? It was a feeble attempt at prompting him, searching for a hint of the man's darker side, if any existed. Not really, just the usual chit-chat. He reached for the remote, flipping on the TV without a care in the world. Hey, let us watch that new show on Netflix. Melanie swallowed hard, her throat dry as sandpaper. The normalcy of the moment felt unbearable. A facade, like a house of cards ready to collapse. Yeah, okay. She settled next to him, tension coiling tightly around her, but her thoughts spiraled back to the briefcase and the money inside. The image of those stacks, the blood-red envelope, the knowledge of how easily Nick could slip between the two worlds, the everyday mechanic and a potential kingpin of crime. She needed to steer the conversation away from that dark shadow looming over them. Nick, she started cautiously. What if someone offered you a lot of money to do something unthinkable? The last bit came out in a whisper, and she felt him tense beside her. What do you mean, unthinkable? His voice was measured, but she could hear the slight hitch in his breath. You know, like, something illegal, she said, trying her best to read his expression, but his face was a mask. Everyone has a price, Mel, he said nonchalantly. But you and I, we're good people. We wouldn't ever hurt anyone. It doesn't matter how much money is on the table, right? Right, of course, she nodded but felt her heart sink. The truth was, she could see how money could twist someone into a monster, especially where families like his were concerned. They sat in silence, watching the TV without really seeing it. Just moments before, they were a simple couple in love, but now Melanie felt a chasm opening between them, a dreadful divide created by secrets she could hardly fathom. Can I ask you something? She blurted out, rolling her fingers nervously over her knee. What's with all the upgrades on our stuff recently? The new phone. The fancy tech. Nick turned to her, his brow furrowed slightly. Just trying to keep up with the times, I guess. Why? You worried about something? She lingered on his words, sensing an edge, a glimpse of something off. He was careful, too careful. A chill slid down her spine as she tried to decipher his tone, but before she could contemplate further, the doorbell rang. Melanie's heart skipped. Who could that be? She exchanged quick glances with Nick. He seemed tense now, the facade cracking. Stay here, he said, his voice low and urgent. I'll get it. No, I want to go with you, she pressed, her mind racing. What if it was someone from his past? Someone who knew. Just stay put. I'll handle it, he insisted, his eyes narrowing. A sense of foreboding washed over her as he crossed to the door. Would he come back with answers or lead in an even darker secret? Instinct screamed for her to follow, but she found herself frozen, caught between fear and intuition. As the door swung open, her breath hitched, the moment stretching out like a tightrope ready to snap. Melanie felt it in her bones. This was just the beginning. What awaited on the other side? The voice she heard sent shockwaves rippling through her. Hello, Nick. We need to talk. Melanie's chest tightened as she peered from her spot at the edge of the living room. The door stood wide open, and all she could see was the shadowy outline of a man. He looked familiar, his silhouette etched into her memory like a bad dream. As Nick's face blanched, the tension in the room thickened, heavy with unspoken words. Who is this? She croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nick shot her a warning glance, his jaw stiffening as he took a step backward, breaking eye contact with the intruder. Just a friend, he stammered, but the unease in his voice told her he was lying. The stranger shifted, stepping into the light, and she felt bile rise in her throat. It was Tony, Nick's old accomplice, the guy with connections to unsavory deals that made her skin crawl. We need to talk, Nick. Now. Melanie's heart thundered as she felt the walls closing in around her. She could read it on Nick's face. Whatever they were about to discuss was far from casual. The air crackled with dread. What do you want? Nick's tone was sharp, laced with anxiety, but the bravado flickered like a candle in a storm. It's about the money, Tony replied, his voice low and gravelly, sliding over her like ice. There's a deal on the table. A big one. And I need you to make a decision. Money. That single word echoed in Melanie's mind, replaying the images she'd seen earlier that evening. The stacks in the briefcase, the blood-red envelope. What was Nick really involved in? Can it wait? Nick snapped, his facade fraying. I'm not in the mood for this. Doesn't he look like you have a choice, the intruder mused, a sneer curling his lips. Can you really afford to ignore this? Or have you forgotten where you came from? Nick clenched his fists, and Melanie felt the pulse of chaos begin to swirl in the pit of her stomach. The shades of his past were ballooning before her eyes, casting dark shadows across their lives. She wanted to scream, to shove Tony out and slam the door behind him, but her feet felt glued to the floor. What is he talking about? She demanded, her voice shaky but firm. Nick hesitated, glancing at Tony before turning to her. I'll explain later. Don't involve her, Tony interrupted sharply, cutting Nick off. This is between us. She doesn't belong in this mess. No. I deserve to know, Melanie insisted, her heart racing, desperation tinged with fear for what Nick was about to hide. What money? What mess? But before Nick could answer her, the door swung shut behind Tony, who loomed closer. There are consequences for turning your back, Nick. It's time to face them. You know that, right? Enough. Nick shouted, and for a fleeting moment, a glimmer of something dangerous sparked in his eyes. Don't threaten me in my own house. The air pulsed thick with tension, and for every second that passed, it felt like the world around them was decaying, crumbling into chaos. Melanie's mind raced as she tried to piece together the fragments of Nick's hidden life. Was he really in too deep? Had he become part of something far more sinister than she ever imagined? Tony stepped forward, pushing the boundaries. You have until tomorrow to decide. Either you're in, or you're out. But trust me, the latter option won't be pretty. As he stalked out of the house, Melanie felt a sense of impending doom settle in. Nick stood frozen, his eyes dark with a turmoil she struggled to comprehend. What do we do now? She asked, voice trembling as she sought clarity, seeking reassurance from the man she thought she knew. That he finally turned to face her, his expression clouded by conflict. It would help if we could trust each other, he said slowly, leaving an unsettling hang in the air. Trust. That word now felt hollow, like a promise that could shatter at any moment. Suddenly, a loud crash outside jolted them both. Turning toward the sound, Melanie's heart jumped into her throat. What was coming next? Was this just the beginning of the chaos unraveling around them? The door rattled, and shadows fell across the threshold. A knock firm and demanding echoed through the house, just like the ominous pulse of fate they couldn't outrun. What did they want now? Melanie squeezed her eyes shut, whispering to herself. Could this nightmare get any worse? Melanie's eyes flew open as the knock resonated again, louder this time, 3 rapid strikes that echoed through the now suffocating silence of the living room. Her pulse raced. Was it Tony returning? Or had something worse drawn near? Nick, she breathed, fear gnawing at her. He was still staring at the door, jaw tight, as if bracing himself for whatever loomed on the other side. Stay behind me, he instructed, his voice low but steady. For a moment, she caught a glimpse of the man she loved, a protector, a warrior ready to shield her from the shadows of his past. But the flicker of that hope was quickly snuffed out by the fire of uncertainty in his gaze. With deliberate slowness, he approached the door. Each step seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 anxious thoughts swirling in his mind. Melanie could barely breathe, her heart hammering wildly against her rib cage. You don't have to answer it, she urged, but she knew that wouldn't ease their predicament. The threat hung heavy like smoke in the air. If Tony had come, who else was left behind? The door creaked open, and her breath caught as two figures loomed in the entrance, silhouetted by the dim light outside. One was familiar Derek, a local thug with a reputation for ruthlessness. His grin spoke volumes, and Melanie clenched her fists, trying to fight the wave of dread washing over her. The other was a mystery, someone she didn't recognize, dressed in dark clothing and with a dangerous glint in his eye. "Nick, you've been busy," Derek said smoothly, taking a step inside, his casual tone belying the threat in his stance. "Thought we'd drop by to discuss the little arrangement Tony mentioned." Melanie felt the floor shift beneath her feet. These men weren't just visitors, they were collectors. Nick's posture stiffened, a layer of defiance covering the anxiety creeping through him. "I told you we weren't doing this anymore," he shot back, but it was weaker than he intended. "Doesn't seem like you have a choice anymore," Derek replied, stepping forward. "That money? It's not just numbers on a paper. It's survival. You either play ball or pay the consequences." Looking into Nick's eyes, Melanie could see his internal battle, the clash between the man she loved and the shadows he tried to escape. "What are you mixed up in, Nick?" she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of the truth she knew she had to face. Just let me handle this," he muttered, but the desperation in his tone left her feeling hollow. Derek laughed, the sound twisted and cruel. "Handle it? Fighting won't save you now. You've got until tomorrow to deliver what you owe. And trust me, it won't be pretty if you don't." Melanie stepped closer to Nick, afraid to lose him, yet equally terrified of what lay ahead. "What do they mean? What do you owe?" "Not now, Melanie," he snapped, the tension spiraling back into the cracks of their relationship. Derek raised an eyebrow, his amusement palpable. "Oh, trust me, it's not about what he owes. It's what he's bound to lose. And tomorrow, at dawn, we'll be back to see if he's ready to settle." With that, they turned on their heels, leaving only a chilling certainty in their wake. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing Melanie and Nick in an atmosphere thick with dread. "What just happened?" she gasped, trying to grasp the enormity of Derek's threat. Nick swallowed hard, glancing at her with haunted eyes. "I'll fix this, I promise. Just trust me." But as he spoke the words, Melanie felt them slip away, like grains of sand through her fingers. The softer parts of trust were breaking, fraying at the edges, unraveling under the pressure of hidden truths. A heavy silence settled over them. "And if tomorrow doesn't end well?" she asked, her voice shaking. "All we can do is fight," he whispered, but even he seemed unsure. Suddenly, from outside, the sound of a revving engine split the night, echoing like a warning shot. Melanie's heart sank. What did this mean? "Nick," she said slowly, "I have a feeling this is just the beginning." The engine roared louder, followed by the unmistakable sound of tires screeching against pavement. Something big was coming, poised at the edge of their lives, and dawn was closer than they realized. What fate awaited them in the hours to come? The night stretched on, heavy with tension, wrapping around Melanie like a suffocating blanket. She could still hear the engine, its growl vibrating through the walls, blurring the lines of her reality. Outside, the streetlights cast eerie shadows that danced across the living room, playing tricks on her mind. "Nick," she began, her voice shaky. A lump lodged in her throat. "We can't just sit here and wait." He ran a hand through his hair, the stress etched deep into his features. "I know," he said, urgency creeping into his tone. "But I need to figure out how to handle Derek and his friend. If they're not just collecting, they could be dangerous." Melanie's heart raced at the thought. She couldn't shake the fear that clung to her skin. "What if they come back before you're ready? We don't have a choice." He snapped, then softened. "I'm sorry, Mel. I didn't want any of this for you. You deserve so much more." She stepped closer, determination filling her. "We deserve a way out. There must be something we can do, something to protect ourselves. Nick's eyes darted to the window, the growing sounds of the night unsettling him. If we go out there, we risk running into them. I don't know why they're after me, but I can't let them hurt you. Melanie wrapped her arms around herself, her thoughts racing. She suddenly remembered the old trunk in the attic, the one Nick had insisted they keep despite countless moves. What if there's something in the trunk? Maybe what trunk? Nick asked sharply, glancing at her with narrowed eyes. The one you never want to talk about. You said it has old stuff from your childhood, but what if it has something else? She could feel a rush of adrenaline that felt like both hope and fear. No, Melanie, he said, urgency flaring in his voice. It's not safe to dig into the past, especially now. Just trust me. Trust you? She echoed, a fire igniting in her. How can I when secrets are all that's between us? I just want to understand what's going on. A tense pause enveloped them, heavy and filled with 1,000 unspoken words. Nick's shoulders sagged as he turned away, unable to meet her eyes. The silence hung thick until it was broken by another roar of the engine outside, followed by the skidding of tires closer this time. Melanie's breath quickened. Did you hear that? She pushed past Nick toward the window, wanting to look but terrified of what she defined. Melanie, don't! He shouted, grabbing her arm, but she shook his grip off, her curiosity overwhelming her fear. Peering outside, her stomach sank. 2 dark trucks idled at the curb. Figures moved in shadows flickering with the light from the street lamps. She couldn't see their faces clearly, but the way they moved told her everything she needed to know. They were looking for something or someone. I need to call the cops, Melanie declared, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. No. Nick hissed. If they're who I think they are, that'll only make things worse. Then what? Just sit here and wait for them to come through the door. Panic clawed at her insides as she fought back tears. Just a few more minutes, he urged, lowering his voice. If we can stay quiet, maybe they'll pass by. But as if on cue, a loud thud echoed against the door, shaking the frame. Melanie's heart jumped. Their time was up. Nick! She gasped. What are we? The thumping grew louder, erratic. Panic churned in her belly. She didn't want to look anymore, but she couldn't help it. Nick's neck strained as he listened intently, his expression darkening. This isn't happening, he whispered, uncertainty in his eyes. Tell me what to do. Melanie cried out, her voice rising. She felt the walls closing in, the fear rising like bile in her throat. Then, suddenly, the door burst open, flinging the 2 men from earlier into the room, their faces colder than stone. Nick immediately stepped in front of Melanie, shielding her from the encroaching danger. Looks like we have company, Derek sneered, his eyes twitching with malicious glee. Time's up, Nick. Ready to play? The moment hung in a dizzying stillness, and Melanie could feel the walls closing in, the reality settling like dark clouds overhead. Everything hinged on Nick's next move, but how far would he go to save them from this nightmare? As the shadows returned to claim their souls, Melanie wondered if dawn would ever break. Would it bring fresh horrors or perhaps a sliver of hope? But just as fear clawed at them, the engine roared again outside, shaking the house violently, leaving Melanie to wonder if escape or confrontation was even possible. Melanie's heart thundered in her chest as she took in Derek's twisted grin. He moved closer, the dim light making his features look sharper, more predatory. Nick remained rigid, his body a fortress, but Melanie could see the uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Was there a way out of this alive? We've been waiting for you, Derek taunted, his voice slithering through the silence like a snake. Thought you could hide forever, Nick? You should know better. The men behind him shifted, all muscles and intimidation. Melanie could feel Nick's breathing change, faster now, like a trapped animal. You shouldn't have come here, he replied, his voice steady despite the panic thrumming just below the surface. Too late for regrets, Derek laughed, a cold, hollow sound. This is a family matter. Get out of here. Melanie shouted, her voice cracking with raw desperation. She squeezed Nick's arm, grounding herself, willing him to find a way. Nick shifted, a glint of determination sparking in his eyes. You don't understand, Derek. This has nothing to do with you anymore. You're out of control. Derek's expression darkened, and the air thickened with tension. You think you can just walk away? We made a deal, remember? Melanie's head spun. A deal? What kind of deal could involve Derek in the first place? She clung to Nick's arm harder, desperation pooling into a swell of fury. What did you do, Nick? What did you deal with him? We'll talk about this later, Mel. He snapped back, eyes locked with Derek. The intensity in their stares ignited a spark, a silent battle of wills. A muscle memory kicked in for Melanie. She spotted the kitchen, its doorway just a few feet away. A plan formed as adrenaline surged through her. I'll distract him, she whispered to Nick, her heart pounding louder than the screams of doubt echoing in her mind. No. Nick's panic surged as he felt her intention. You can't, but Melanie was already moving. She dashed toward the kitchen, hoping the element of surprise would grant her mere seconds to think. The heart of the house felt strangely familiar, and she spotted a knife on the cutting board. Heart racing, she grabbed it, keeping it hidden behind her back as she turned to face Derek and his two accomplices. What's the matter, Melanie? Derek smirked. Scared of your husband's past? How do you know each other? She said, her voice projecting bravado she didn't feel. What did he owe you? Derek stepped closer, amusement dancing in his eyes. You know, it must be nice living in the dark while your dear husband plays puppet for our family. But don't worry, we're just here to collect what's ours. Melanie felt fury replace her fear. He's not yours or anyone else's. But before she could finish, the men advanced, their towering figures blocking her only escape. Panic tightened her throat. In that moment of fear, she flicked the knife into view. It glinted ominously in the dim light. Back off! She yelled, summoning every ounce of strength. You're outnumbered. Derek's expression turned to mock horror. Please, darling, you think you can protect him? He's the one who put us in this position. Behind her, she heard Nick take a deep breath, likely weighing his next move. Mel, drop the knife, he urged, desperation lacing his voice, but she couldn't back down now. Whatever he did, it doesn't define him. She shouted, her chest tight with the fear of losing Nick. We're leaving, all of us. Derek's expression shifted from amusement to rage. You really think you can escape this? You have no idea who you're up against. Then, unexpectedly, the door flew open again, this time revealing a third figure tall and commanding, shadowed by the porch light. Melanie squinted into the brightness, unable to see clearly. It's time to end this, the figure declared, voice sharp as glass. Suddenly, the tension thickened like a loaded gun, and Melanie felt that this was a turning point, a pivotal moment that could unravel everything. But before she could process what was happening, a loud crash echoed as the figure charged into the room, leaving both this dark chapter and the future hanging perilously in the balance. What secrets did this newcomer bring, and how would it change the game? The figure stepped into the dim light, revealing a sharp jaw and piercing blue eyes that seemed to slice through the atmosphere. As they moved with purpose, Melanie caught a glimpse of familiar lines in the face, lines that made her heart drop. She knew him, or at least she thought she did. Zach. Melanie gasped, her heart skipping in disbelief. This was Nick's estranged brother, a man spoken of only in whispers, a ghost haunting the edges of their lives. Zach stood tall, confidence radiating from him, cutting through the tension like a blade. Derek's expression twisted in annoyance, his bravado faltering. What are you doing here? He snapped, eyes narrowing. What does it look like? Zach replied, measuring his words with a cool precision. I'm here to settle this. The silence in the room thickened, the weight of past secrets and unfinished business hanging over them like a dark cloud. Melanie's mind raced. What had she stumbled into? Settle what? Nick interjected, concern filling his voice. This isn't your fight. Oh, but it is, brother, Zach said with a smirk, stepping further into the room, his presence commanding the attention of both Derek's thugs and Melanie. I've taken care of the family business. You didn't think I'd just disappear, did you? Derek's lips curled into a sneer. You think you can just walk in here and enough? Zach's voice cut through the tension hotter than a firestorm. This is done. You've overplayed your hand, Derek. It's time for you to pay the price. Melanie felt the ground slip beneath her as the pieces began to fit together. Zach had been gone too long, and she'd only known snippets of Nick's family saga. What exactly had happened to drive them apart? What kind of business had Zach returned to confront? Derek laughed, raw and cutting. And you think you can take me down? You're just a shadow in the dark. But Zach seemed unfazed, eyes hardening like steel. You don't know the lengths I've gone to. I'm not the same man you knew. Melanie's heart raced anew. The stakes were being raised, and they were playing a game far beyond her understanding. What are you talking about? She whispered urgently, trying to peel back the layers of secrecy. What's really going on here? You'll find out soon enough, Zach replied, casting Melanie a brief, understanding glance, as if he knew the turmoil twisting inside her. As more tension built, Derek waved a hand dismissively, his minions clenching their fists, waiting for a signal to attack. Let us finish this. It's been long enough. Suddenly, the room was alive with movement. Zach lunged forward, shattering the chilling silence, while Nick pulled Melanie closer, instinctively shielding her. The knife in her hand trembled as she fought to keep her horror in check. Melanie's mind spun chaos encircling her, the past crashing violently into the present. Was this the reckoning Nick had been avoiding all along? But then, just as the darkness threatened to swallow them whole, a loud crash echoed outside, punctuating the scene. The sound was unmistakable, a police siren. The entire room froze, all eyes darting toward the door. Derek's face paled, a flicker of fear betraying his bravado. No, they can't be here. It might be too late for you, Zach said, eyes shining with inscrutable resolve. Before anyone could react, Melanie felt urgency pressing at her chest. This was her moment. Their lives were hanging by a thread, and she couldn't remain passive any longer. Something had to change. Nick! She shouted, adrenaline surging. We need to go now. But as they sprang into action, the reality of their choices settled heavily around them. Would they fight? Would they run? Or was this the moment they all collided in the biggest showdown yet? The sirens blared louder, and with it came the thrill of uncertainty. The stakes had never been higher, and Melanie knew it was only a matter of moments before everything spiraled into chaos. What would happen when the law stepped in, and whose secrets would be exposed in the crossfire? The moment Melanie shouted, the air seemed to crackle with impending chaos. Nick didn't hesitate, grabbing her wrist, he pulled her toward the back door. They needed to escape before the storm broke loose. Zach! Nick yelled. What about you? Zach cast a quick glance back, determination etched across his features. I'll hold them off. Just go. But as the words left his mouth, Derek's thugs were already surging forward. The noise in the room became a cacophony of shouting and shuffling feet. Melanie's heart raced. She could feel the rough texture of the wall against her back as Nick shoved her through the narrow opening of the door. Panic gripped her throat like a vice. Just outside, an alley stretched between the buildings, a shadowy sanctuary that could either lead to their salvation or their downfall. The sirens wailed louder, a reminder of their imminent liberation or capture. Keep moving. Nick urged, his voice barely raising above the yelling inside. They darted into the alley, adrenaline pushing them forward. Melanie felt her lungs burning from the exertion, fear crackling in her veins. "What is happening?" she gasped, glancing back as they turned the corner, anxiety swelling within her. "Why are they after us?" Nick's jaw clenched. "Derek won't let this go. Zach has a score to settle. We need to figure out what he's really planning." As they reached the mouth of the alley, the distant blue and red lights cast an eerie glow, a beacon of hope. But it felt wrong. Unsafe. In the depths of her mind, doubt twisted like a knife. Who was Zach really? "Nick, wait." Melanie pulled him back. "What if we're walking into a trap? What if this is all part of Derek's plan?" He gripped her shoulders, his eyes filled with urgency. "I won't let anything happen to you. Trust me. We need to get as far away from here as possible. I can't trust anyone." She thought of Zach's blue eyes, the dangerous confidence they held. What if he's not the only one with a hidden agenda? A sudden sound echoed behind them, a shattering noise that made her jump. They exchanged horrified glances before turning to see shadows spilling out from the back door. Derek's men were coming. The fight wasn't over. "Run!" Nick shouted, fear and determination mingling in his voice. They bolted down the street, skirting the edge of the illuminated chaos. Just ahead, the police cruisers had arrived, their doors flung open as officers poured onto the scene, weapons drawn. "Over here!" one officer yelled, pointing toward the alley. The sight paralyzed Melanie. Were they safe now, or was this just the beginning? Nick hesitated, weighing their choices. But before he could decide, a gunshot rang out, echoing through the night. The sound cracked like thunder, sending a jolt through her body. "Get down!" He pulled immediately, crashing into the ground with her. The sirens faded momentarily in the distance, swallowed by the shock of chaos erupting around them. What was that? Melanie gasped, her breath quickening. She felt the cold pavement beneath her, rough and unyielding. "Derek," Nick muttered, anger flashing in his eyes. He'll do anything to keep his secrets safe. The fight was escalating, and the reality of it crashed into her with horrifying clarity. She had no idea what secrets were buried in Nick's family or how deep Derek's treachery went. Her heart pounded as she slowly raised her head to scan the chaotic scene, desperate for answers. Then she saw Zach, still standing. He was fighting off Derek's men, a blur of motion and fury among the confusion. She could barely process the sight when a chilling realization struck: if the police saw him, they'd assume he was the threat. "Zach!" she screamed, panic tightening around her heart. "You need to get out of here." But his eyes flared with a hint of recognition, a flicker of connection before he tackled one of the goons, sending him sprawling sideways. In that moment, amidst confusion and impending doom, Melanie realized they were teetering on the edge of a deeper darkness, and someone had to make a choice. Would they stay and fight for the truth, or chase after safety? A new determination ignited inside her, but as she looked at Nick, she understood the weight of their decision was about to change everything. But who would make the first move, and what awaited them in the aftermath? "Zach, please." Melanie's voice cut through the chaos, but time seemed to stretch out impossibly. Nick grabbed her arm, pulling her closer to the shadows of the alley, but her eyes were glued to Zach, locked in combat. "Mel, we have to go," Nick urged, his panic blending with their fear. She could tell he was torn between the loyalty he felt for his friend and the urgent need to keep her safe. But Melanie couldn't abandon Zach. Not now, when he was risking everything for them. "If we leave him, they'll catch him. We can't do that." Nick's brow furrowed deeply, frustration and urgency clawing at his features. "What do you want to do? Just stand here." Zach bashed another thug into the brick wall, his fists lethal against the attackers who lunged at him one after another. Each blow he threw was a testament to his determination, but Melanie knew desperation was a dangerous fuel. "Zach! Get away from there!" She screamed again, but even as she spoke, she felt a damp sweat trickle down her back. Then, a sudden crack split the air, the unmistakable sound of gunfire aimed at Zach. Her heart lurched. Nick. He's in danger. Barely a second later, Zach spun, ducking as the bullet tore through the air, narrowly missing him. It struck a trash can behind him, metal clanking and echoing through the alley. He shouted something, but it was drowned out by the startled yells from the police officers who had just come into view. Zach! Run! Melanie shouted, the urgency in her voice filling the air, growing louder than the gunfire, but the moment was thick with tension. Two officers aimed their guns, their eyes wide with confusion, unsure of whom to target. Drop your weapon! They yelled, pointing at Zach. Stop! He's not the enemy. Melanie shouted, but it fell on deaf ears. They wouldn't see what she saw, a friend fighting for a lost cause. In that moment of chaos, Nick made his decision. We have to go. He pulled her back, desperation igniting in his grip. We can't help him if we get caught too. No. I want to leave him. Melanie, think. They'll shoot you too. As the sound of breaking glass overwhelmed them, Nick's words sunk in. She felt the weight of dread settle in her stomach. Leaving Zach behind meant risking his life. But staying could mean losing both Nick and her chance to unravel the truth about Derek and the vast darkness swirling around them. Gritting her teeth, she took a step forward, instinctively ready to help, but Nick stopped her. We save ourselves now, or we're all dead. In the short time it took for her to weigh her options, chaos surged around them. A new wave of Derek's men poured into the scene, the fight escalating into a confusing fray of shouting, gunfire, and flashing lights. A loud bang erupted, and Melanie flinched, as did Nick beside her. Get down. He pulled her downward again. Zach. She called, but she was losing sight of him in the pandemonium. Suddenly, she caught a glint from the corner of her eye. A figure emerged from the chaos, one of Derek's men closing in on them. Reflexes kicked in, and she shot out her foot, catching him off guard. He stumbled, and Nick took the opportunity to shove him against the wall, grabbing his weapon. Run, Melanie. Now. Nick shouted, urgency throbbing in his tone. Finally, they darted from the alley, fleeing into the street where the sirens blared in a vicious chorus. Police and gang members collided like waves against the rocks, the confusion threatened to swallow everyone. Melanie felt the pull of danger tangle around her limbs. They stumbled into an open area, panting. The world spun in a dizzying display of lights and sounds, but her heart was still racing for Zach. Would he make it out alive? Before she could breathe, the brutality of the situation struck her. The truth lurked just beyond her grasp, and with every moment that slipped away, she feared more for Zach than for their safety. We can't just leave him, she murmured, her voice wavering. We have to go back. You can't save everyone, Melanie. Nick's tone was sharp, but his eyes shimmered with the same fear. All that uncertainty consumed them. And still, the darkness loomed ahead. They needed answers and fast. But as these thoughts ran rampant in her mind, Melanie couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. They weren't alone, something else was coming. What was waiting just beyond the shadows? The night felt far from over. The chaos swirled around them like a tempest as Melanie and Nick raced down the street, adrenaline pumping through their veins. They barely registered the blaring sirens or the shadows of police officers creeping into the periphery of their vision. All she could think of was Zach, his life hanging in the balance while they fled toward uncertain safety. Nick, Melanie panted, struggling to catch her breath as they pressed on. We have to go back for him. The knot in her stomach twisted tighter with every heartbeat. Mel, listen to me. Nick pleaded, urgency edging into his voice. We can't risk getting caught, not now. If they get us, we won't be able to do anything for him. He was right, and that painfully clear truth sharpened her resolve. But the panic clawing at her heart made it hard to think straight. Caught between fear and love, she gritted her teeth, their path illuminated only by the flashing lights that cut through the night. As they rounded the corner, Melanie stole a glance back toward the alley. She could see shadows moving, a blur of action that reminded her of Zack fighting for his life. Images of him being cornered by Derek's men, trapped in a web of his own making, pierced her heart like a knife. "Stop!" Nick urged, grabbing her hand as she started to veer back. "We need a plan. We can't just run into the lioness den without knowing what we're up against." Melanie's emotions swirled violently: fear, anger, helplessness. "Plan or no plan, Zack is getting hurt because we're leaving him." She pulled her arm free, bristling against the weight of her uncertainty. Nick hesitated, frustration mingling with fear in his eyes. "Then let us find a way to get help," he said, voice firm. "Find a way back to him without getting killed." The fierce determination in his gaze sparked something inside her, a flicker of hope intertwined with chaos. They dashed toward a nearby diner, slipping inside just as a cacophony of shouts erupted outside. The air was thick with the smell of grease and burnt coffee, the clatter of silverware and idle chatter muted under the tension. People looked their way, eyes wide with curiosity, but they didn't understand the urgency clawing at Nick's gut. "Stay low," he hissed, and Melanie nodded, her body feeling like lead. They slipped into a booth near the back, watching the chaos unfold through the diner's large windows. "The police will handle this," Nick whispered, brow furrowed. "They have to." But Melanie shook her head. "What if they don't? What if they're too late?" Her voice trembled as she thought of Zack fighting off Derek's men. "It's a risk we have to take," Nick replied, frustration spilling from him like an uncontained fire. "If we go back now, we'll be caught. It'll only make everything worse." She hated that he was right but felt that nagging feeling deep in her bones, the unsettling notion that things were about to get worse no matter what they chose. Suddenly, the blaring sirens outside quieted, replaced by haunting echoes of chaos fading into the distance. A chill ran down Melanie's spine. They could have sworn at least 3 squad cars had arrived, and yet now, it felt eerily quiet. "What do you think is happening?" she asked, eyes darting between the windows, scanning for movement. "Maybe they're moving in on Derek's men," Nick suggested, trying to remain optimistic. But Melanie felt a tugging dread pulling her thoughts in a different direction. What if they're too busy chasing him to notice if he slips away? A tense silence filled the booth as they exchanged looks steeped in fear. "I can't shake the feeling that we need to do something," she whispered, fire igniting in her chest. "Zack is out there fighting for us. What if we're too late?" The diner door swung open with a bang, and Melanie's heart leapt into her throat. Derek stepped in, flanked by a couple of his henchmen. He looked around the diner with the confidence of someone who owned the night, and Melanie felt her chest tighten as he locked eyes with her. "Found you," he said, voice dripping with malice. "I hoped you'd be foolish enough to hide." Nick shifted protectively in front of her, but Derek's laugh echoed with a cruel finality. "This ends here, Nick. Come out or watch the consequences unfold." Panic surged in Melanie's veins. This was it. They were out of options, trapped in a corner. Nick whispered fiercely, "We need to move, now." With hearts pounding, they bolted from the booth just as Derek gestured to his goons. But as they dashed toward the back exit, a loud commotion erupted outside. "The police were here again," shouted commands echoing through the air. "Get them!" Derek barked, shoving past tables as chaos erupted. Melanie could hear shouts, gunfire, and the clash of bodies spilling into the diner. It felt like a climax of a dark storm finally breaking loose. "Get down!" Nick shouted as they ducked behind a counter. The walls rattled with tension, and time slowed as everything descended into chaos, a culmination of decisions made that brought them to this very moment. A plan had formed, but it was now a matter of survival. "We can't stay here," Melanie yelled, fighting against the fear anchoring her down. "Zack!" She shouted over the clamor, hoping he'd dematerialize out of the chaos. And just when hope felt lost, a familiar silhouette burst through the door. Zack had returned, and with him came the frantic turns of fate. "Get out, now!" he roared, opening fire at Derek's men. Melanie's heart soared at the sight of him, but it was also carved with tension. "Hang on!" Nick shouted. Together, they launched the door open, fighting against the tide of chaos racing toward them. Light flooded from above, the sirens blaring like sirens of freedom. The three of them burst into the open night air, a whirlwind of fear and desperation blending together in their minds. This was a fight for survival, a fight for every ounce of trust that had been tested within. And as they charged into the night, Melanie felt the weight of purpose fill her. They would confront the darkness and unveil the secrets together. Because at this moment, nothing could tear them apart. In the end, it wasn't just about survival. It was about facing the storm head-on, unearthing the truth, and determining the destiny of their intertwined lives. They would rise from the ashes, no matter how deeply the shadows had entwined them. Now, listen up, folks. This is your moment. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss out on the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button right now to feed the algorithm. You know you want to. And flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what just happened. Finally, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans understand how important it is to support this channel. Let us do this.